I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin here from What's Your Work Fit. I hope you're having a good and successful week. I cannot believe we're into the middle of November. I hope you are doing well. I hope you're living well, and I hope work is fulfilling. We have a great show today with an absolutely phenomenal return guest. We'll get to that. We'll get to her in a moment. But before I do that, I want to encourage any one of you who is new to What's Your Work Fit to engage with us, to subscribe to us on one or both of our platforms. We're on LinkedIn Live. You can look for What's Your Work Fit. Hit that blue oval with the plus follow button. We are also part of YouTube with the What's Your Work Fit channel on YouTube. You can find us there. Hit subscribe, and you'll never miss future live shows, recorded shows, and also our amazing clips that we put up after each show. Next up, I want to point you to what I think is one of the most exciting value propositions that What's Your Work Fit has, and that's our new Substack. You can join us on Substack by logging on to dansmolin.substack.com, and when you get there, you will see what's essentially a digital newspaper where you can find links to our live and recorded shows, our video clips, also our audio podcast, and most importantly, our written Substack pieces, which I take a lot of pride in producing. This is growing nicely. I love this community, and this is really, I think, the future of social media engagement, especially for people who are living and working their days to create meaning, positive meaning. One last thing I want to ask, and that is if you enjoy the content you are getting here on What's Your Work Fit, I ask that you tell 5 of your friends to subscribe to us on the platform or platforms of their choice. As you know, we are on LinkedIn, we are on YouTube, we are on Substack, but we are also an audio podcast, and they can find our audio podcast platformed wherever they get their audio podcasts. Okay, it is the greatest of pleasure to bring back my dear friend and colleague and unindicted co-conspirator, Denise Brouder.
Hey, Dan.
How are you, my friend? Good to see you.
I am well. Unindicted co-conspirator. I like that title. I'm going to run with that one.
Very good. So let me tell you about Denise if you don't already know her. She is the founder of the Future of Work Alliance, and I want to get into that. What is that? It's a collective of entrepreneurs, practitioners, researchers, and writers who are shaping modern work. Denise, for those who are not familiar with the Future of Work Alliance, elaborate on what I said and also take us to the current moment of where we are at as a collaborative.
So I guess, the easiest way to describe it, as you started there, was that we are a global network of future work entrepreneurs, and that can be people that are developing hardware or software or services or solutions. But we are entrepreneurs that are at the very rough edges of the future work conversation. So our work is kind of incrementally growing out the ecosystem of future work. That's kind of at our core who we are, but our purpose was really to solve a problem that I could see in the market. And that had a lot to do with a lot of my own observations being in the future work space over these good number of years, has been in rooms with particularly that mid-level leadership team inside enterprise organizations that were kind of straddling the work getting done on the ground and straddling senior leadership, being very, very stuck in silos of thinking and ways of being. And some of the greatest aha moments I've seen is when people kind of get out of those silos and see what their colleagues are doing and think bigger, think different. So I found that a lot of us entrepreneurs on that rough edge of the future work had these insights you couldn't really get anywhere else. You couldn't find it in a white paper. You can't find it on a YouTube video because we're living it every day. And our goal at the Alliance is to solve that leadership awareness problem by connecting those insights to kind of mid-level leadership teams to help them see a broader picture in the relation to the modernization of the workplace and our approach to work. And that's the problem that we're looking to solve as a community.
So you're doing this currently full-time. And last week you had this amazing experience where you got to represent the Future of Work Alliance at the Unwork, I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to say the Unwork conference, but in Toronto at a Future of Work conference that several of our members participated in. And I'm wondering if you could talk in particular to some of your key takeaways from that event.
So we were fortunate to be on the ground in Toronto last week, and we had two different events happening one day after the other. The first, as you mentioned, was Ashley Proctor's produced Co-working Canada, the Unconference.
The Unconference.
So it's designed to be the opposite of a kind of a structured conference. And that was a phenomenal experience because there were 5 or 6 of us Alliance members there, one giving a keynote, the rest of us on a panel, the rest of us participating in workshops. It was very cool to see our diverse backgrounds inside future work playing a big role at the Unconference. And one of the big things on our panel had a lot to do with, I was sitting alongside a couple other folks that run communities inside of the industry of co-working. And we were talking about growth of the community and what matters in growth. And the other peers answered their questions. But when it came to us in the Alliance, I had to really be honest that everything I've learned in business school, I'm doing the exact opposite of, completely the utter exact opposite. I don't think in terms of number of members as a growth variable at all. I think about momentum, and I think about opportunity, and I think about us being aware of the opportunities in front of us and capturing them to build momentum and how we're thinking about the nature of the future of work, as opposed to kind of a traditional growth mechanism. But that was the Co-working Canada conference, which was great to be able to position ourselves. But I think you may be talking about the day after our own individual event. So we, as an Alliance, initially began as this thought process. There's loads of people out there building cool things on the rough edge of future of work. And my thought was, what if we could connect to each other? And if we did that well, what insights could we generate? And if we did that, how could we influence the enterprise market to think differently? And if we did that well, how could that influence people and point them back into the services and solutions inside the Alliance, thereby creating this flywheel? But what I really discovered, Dan, in Toronto, it was the second time that we've run an in-person event, which wasn't our plan last year. It was an opportunity that came up, and it was absolute magic in a bottle. Absolute magic in a bottle. It was a curated event simply in the sense that we reached out to our network and we invited in mid-level business leaders from a variety of industries that had a genuine curiosity about the subject we were speaking about, was human performance and AI as a subset of the bigger future of work. And from the moment those folks arrived, Dan, I have to tell you, it was a spectacular experience because the room opened up. People were sharing genuinely the problems in their domains. They were leaning in to help other people. We were having honest, heartfelt conversations about the challenges of AI at work. And more than anything, these leaders were getting out of their own way, seeing how peers in other industries are tackling and sharing in their same problems. And just that connection alone was advancing the way that they were thinking to help solve their problems. And that just came about because the Alliance has, it's just the way we are. It's the members that we have. It's that je ne sais quoi, hard to put your finger on it, but it was magic in a bottle. And we've done that twice, which to me, that is going to be our formula going forward. And that's how we're going to connect these insights to business leaders.
Well, we met in New York last year. We also had a virtual event in London earlier this year, which you were referring to. And for point of recognition here, I have been a founding member of the Future of Work Alliance since it came out of your head. That's nearly 2 years ago. And what I truly appreciate, you and I have talked about this. I think that people like us who are thinking deeply and broadly about modern work and how it's changing in the moment, we often found ourselves as little islands of thought with no means of sharing it to other people who may be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And the real magic I find of this group is that, yes, we're all connecting together, and it's been absolutely joyous.
Yeah.
You know, there's no competition. There's no, I've got 5 digits worth of followers on this social media platform.
Never comes up.
Never, ever comes up. It's not important. What is important is that we're all on the front line of this, radically changing modern work experience, not just the workplace, which doesn't necessarily mean place anymore. We'll get into that. But every aspect of it. It's not just the chairs and the tables. It's getting to our discussion today, which I'm going to pivot to, which is how does time factor into the modern workplace? You know, so many of the discussions we've had here on What's Your Work Fit has touched on square footage. It's touched on, it's extending where to maybe people who are working from anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, we have people all over the globe as members of the Future of Work Alliance. The area that we are leaning into a lot as members is, how does time factor into all of this? So you gave me a nice little segue there, Denise, and I wanted to help our audience get started by describing, how does time factor into the modern workplace?
Yeah, and I think a good way to kick this off, Dan, is to connect in what you just said about the Alliance.
Yeah.
When we were in Toronto and we had a room of like 20 odd senior leaders from like all around the Toronto area, I really started by saying, thank you for your time and your attention. And it just struck me like, why do these 20 people show up to a room where they knew a few people and they knew the general topic, but had no expectation of what was going to happen in the room? Like, when you are willing to not necessarily spend your time, but they were willing to invest their energy. And, you know, a nice pick up the point there is the Alliance is a volunteer organization, fully volunteer, developed, run, and led. Money doesn't trade in any part of the Alliance. And when you take out that kind of element of money or pay for play, you get the best from people. And I think the people that show up to our events are bringing their best selves, which lean to creating environment and a learning that you just cannot replicate in other domains and in other ways. But it just strike me like I very appreciative that people will invest their energy in stuff that we do with the Alliance. But this is a really fascinating question that you're bringing up here about the nature of time, the relative nature of time, because it's not a most practical as the design of a workplace or the right collaboration tool. We're getting into more of the meatier things, which are things that we like to talk about at the Alliance. That's why we have such a we have a broad membership from around the world doing lots of things, because we think deeply about challenging the assumptions that run the way that we approach work. And your question is a fabulous question to start with this time.
So Ben Franklin, who is obviously a founding father of the United States, famously wrote of time, that time is money. And I'm sure when Denise was year one in B school, you probably had time discussions pounded into your head to the point of exhaustion. And, for so much of my early career, time was something that you had to make the most of and squeeze every little ounce of value out of. Unfortunately, people like me took the wrong lesson and maximized time by working 80-hour weeks, which didn't necessarily render me a happy camper. But it had remunerative benefit to a certain degree. The discussion of time now changes in great part because modern work is relying less on timesheets, relying less on the 9 to 5. I even bristle a little bit, Denise, when people talk about, well, what do you do on your 5 to 9 after you've done your 9 to 5? And I'm like, no. We're going way beyond that.
Yeah.
We are going way, way beyond that because it's really less about Ben Franklin and more about Albert Einstein, about quantum physics and bending time. That time really is a construct that, for lack of a better term, doesn't have the agency that it once did. Right? So let's get started on this. Let's talk first about the old paradigm of time. Okay, everybody knows this. You go to work and your focus is entirely on the work that you're doing, and your work time directly relates to your work output. The person feeding the steel mill here, they have a numerical output to the number of hours that they put into their time. I guess the same thing would be said at a GM final assembly plant building Cadillacs. The more time you put in, the more Cadillacs roll off the assembly line. But there's a new paradigm to time. And Denise, interrupt me if anything sounds interesting. And
let's go back to the old. Can we go back one slide and let's talk about that real quick?
Yeah.
A big way I think about the future of work is from like a 70,000 foot level, not even a 30,000 foot. I kind of see this evolution of work encompassing everything. So in this industrial era model, which lasted for a long time, the value of the workplace there had nothing to do with that person.
No.
The value of a workplace were the assets, those physical, that urn, the machinery, the fire, like all those tools were very unique. That was the value. The human was highly commoditized. And that is not obviously what I guess I'm trying to contextually say is that is the opposite of knowledge work. Right. Where time in this instance, in the industrial model, the human and measuring time, it was so irrelevant. What mattered is how much value and how much output could you get from those assets, of which people were kind of a component of it, more a cog in the wheel, essentially. So at one point, hours worked was the simplest variable to calculate of all. You knew how much a human could do in a situation like that. So the industrial model was very straightforward. And it carried us for many, 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 many years and drove enormous amount of economic value. So it wasn't a bad model. It was a model for its time, but we have moved since then, and that's the friction.
Now let me tell you about working under the old model. So I think the standard work week was inherently industrial. It was doing heavy labor, difficult, often repetitive work that did require a lot of skill. But there was only so much of it that you could do in a week, otherwise risk yourself harm and injury. I didn't realize that as a knowledge worker when I started my career. So I went way beyond the 40-hour work week. In my first job, I actually did get paid overtime. I nearly doubled my income
in overtime
because there was so much work to be done, but I was still a knowledge worker. I wasn't hammer and tong pounding rivets into a steel abutment or something like that. But it was good until it wasn't. And later on in my career, Denise, as you know, I was working 80-hour weeks as a mid-level executive in an advertising agency. And it wasn't hammer and tong, but it was never ending. It was a flood of need that I could never fulfill. And, I'd get all my work done in a week. I still would have to do agency billing at the end of the week and would have to come in on Saturdays to do that. So the model, as I worked under, I think kind of lost its agency, lost its effectiveness, if you will. Certainly as a knowledge worker, that was the case for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to pivot to the new paradigm because I think this is important. Fewer of us are talking about the hours that we work. More of us are talking about the fact that we have more autonomy to do the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that may mean breaking up the clock so that maybe you still work 40 hours a week, but the day of work, the work day, is not continuous. It's more continual.
Yep.
It involves taking breaks. We had time off for lunch or whatever, but it may mean taking the afternoon off to go see your kid play rugby or basketball, or see them, like I used to do, watch my daughter in swim practice. I still got back to the work when I was done, and I may work till 10 o'clock at night, and I still could have done 40 hours in a week that way. More and more people are doing that. You and I have talked about the thing we haven't figured out about time autonomy, and I'm hoping you can expand on it, is this notion of time anxiety. Earlier this summer, the headlines were talking about the endless workday.
Yeah.
And people who were knowledge workers suddenly getting called into a Zoom meeting that was well beyond the confines of the day.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could offer some of your thoughts about this new paradigm, good and bad.
Can I answer that by asking you a question?
Of course.
You gave an example before about in your career in the agency world, you worked 80 hours a week.
Yes.
What would it have looked like if you hadn't? What would it look like if you'd worked 60 hours a week or had pared back those hours to a more balanced number? And why do you think you didn't at that time?
Okay, what would it have looked like?
Yes.
Well, I probably would have spent more time with Marcia, my wife.
Yep.
We didn't have kids then. And I worked 40 miles from where I lived.
Yeah.
And so I would have a long commute to and from the office. And we weren't allowed to work beyond the co-location back then. It just wasn't available. So if you were going to put yourself in traffic, and sometimes my commute would be over an hour, sometimes 2 hours in, sometimes 2 hours home, you're there. So you're going to have to do the work then. Now, I was working on highly caffeinated coffee and adrenaline most of the time.
Right.
And with those 80-hour weeks, initially I could do it and I thought I was Superman. But then you start making mistakes and you start getting really bad physical impacts. Your question about what would it have looked like had I had a shorter day? Well, hopefully I would have had the human support that I had asked for back in the day. Many, many years ago, we didn't have AI. We didn't have access to a lot of contract help. So if you didn't have the help, you ended up having to do the work.
Yeah.
Hopefully, in another life, I would have had a shorter week, which would have meant less time at the chiropractor getting cracked because I would throw myself out of alignment. And anybody who knows what a sacroiliac misalignment feels like, well, it's intense pain. It's screaming pain, hot screaming pain. I probably would have avoided a lot of that. I think I would have been less surface acting happy, and more internally happy. People thought I was the poster child of you can have it all, because I always smiled and I always was self-deprecating about whatever was going on. Deep inside, I was falling apart because I was pushing so hard, Denise. I hope I answered the questions.
Yes, you did. And I asked that because time is the great equalizer.
Mm,
We all have the same clock. We all have the same 24 hours in the day. That is, in this world, that's one of the few things we all share equally. It's the same clock we play to. But I do see a massive difference between time and energy. And even the way we talk about it, we'll say we spend our time doing this, but we invest our energy in the things that we love. Or we talk about investing our energy in stuff that we are more drawn to. So I guess I asked that question more in that context that we all have the same clock. And I do wonder if time autonomy and time anxiety is a personal perspective of balance. And how do we weigh the things that are important and not important? And why do we overgive in some aspects of our work life and undergive in some aspects of our personal? Is that your responsibility versus an organization's, or is it a mix of both responsibilities?
that's a good question, and I don't have the answer to that. I would encourage anybody watching the playback of this episode to chime in with any comments that you have based on your own experience as an individual contributor, but also as a leader. I would be really interested to know that. I do wonder, Denise, if it is more prevalent in young up and comers,
Mm-hmm.
our Gen Z executives who are trying to get experience. And because it's so important to have face time with their leadership,
Mm-hmm.
if that time anxiety is ratcheted up because they need more time for perhaps intentional engagement with peers and with leaders and others who can help them do their jobs better.
I think that we're all we have a different point of view. I think on wh- how we are spending our time. And to your point earlier, a big feature of traditional careers was face time. Like you said, there was a lot of merit to being in the office, being in front of the leader. I think that in today's world, one of the outcomes of this evolution of modern work is kind of breaking down this facade and looking at the kind of the more, what are the real things of value. So I think it's probably less about FaceTime and more about relationship building. Like I would
Mm,
know if somebody's being disingenuous, if somebody's simply, I can tell if somebody's just simply trying to bypass others and climb the corporate ladder at a disadvantage to the greater good, versus somebody that wants to be in a room with me or you because they want to build a relationship. And again, I'm going to go back to our Toronto event. That was the case.
mm-hmm.
These were a bunch of strangers that didn't really have 3 hours in their day to give away to
Right.
a thought that something might come of this, but they did, and they invested their energy and their attention in that room and built relationships they walked away with. And this is where we're beginning to really kind of be a lot more appreciative and a lot more discerning about where we place our time and energy for all of these reasons. Like, so the point being, I think FaceTime is crumbling. And I think the value of real relationships is taking a higher precedent. That may differ across situations and jobs and industries, but I think it's a human trait that is evolving. Does that make sense in terms of how I see that?
It does. It does. I would also add that with time anxiety, sometimes we put the fear of missing out onto the wrong things, missed out. We value more the meetings that we need to be present at, the status updates, the being seen in the office versus missing out on your daughter's first steps,
Yeah.
um, birthday parties, trips, going to the hair salon to get your hair cut.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people do we know who had to cancel appointments so many times that the hairstylist canceled them and said,
Yeah.
I can't work with you anymore, right?
Yeah. Small things, but those are the big things. Like a lot of times in our day, that's why the core flexibility uh, and time autonomy. A lot of times people need time flexibility over location flexibility. Ideally, it's both, but they're two different things. And just, I'll give you a great example. I have 3 children
Mm-hmm.
that are all very, very different. And I know by the nature of who they are, the 3 of them need different things in any given day. Like my daughter, when she comes home from school, there's a 15-minute window where she will just unload everything that happened. But if I miss that window, I miss what happened, and therefore
Right.
I'm not getting insights. So I don't need time flexibility or location flexibility all day long, but I know to optimize the way I operate throughout my day, there are certain pockets of flexibility, time flexibility, and autonomy that I do need. that you don't need, but I do? And can
Right.
we think with a more flexible mindset to kind of enable those things?
This is all a part of the work fit that I talk about.
Yeah,
It's gaining agency over the day so that you can determine what's important. And clearly, if you are working for someone or a company, yes, you have requirements that you have to meet, but it doesn't mean that you have to rob yourself of time during the day. I mean, this is where I think we, as the Future of Work Alliance,
yeah,
I think can be the greatest advocates for the day,
correct.
in that I believe, Denise, we can highly influence and positively influence traditional workplace leaders to value the day differently, as opposed to, I own you when you're here or when you're online, versus, I'm going to look at your outputs. I'm going to look at how you move the needle in the positive direction. The project management leadership or the group leadership that affected a positive change, that created the good metrics, more revenue for our group, more gross profit. Uh, oh, and here's another thing: longer lifetime value of the hired talent in our group, longer
Correct.
tenures,
Yeah.
which is so often overlooked. But that, if you get all the work fit things right, people stay on the job and they perform.
That is, I mean, there's loads, there's even, we can extend beyond that, all the ways and the reasons
Right.
why this adds to and again, I have a finance background, so I understand like value propositions, inherent risk,
Right.
projection of value. All those things you said are true, and they lead to the value of a person over time. But the one thing I will say, and I kind of realized this is what we're doing at the Alliance, kind of realized without realizing it, is we ended our Toronto event last week. I just had a couple of quick words at the end based on everything I observed, and it was that change is not a top-down mandate. It does not come from the top down.
Right.
Change happens in rooms like this when you have mid-level leaders that are executing strategy by numbers. They're the largest numbers in an organization. It happens in rooms like this where we change how we think. This is where change happens. So I guess the point I'm making to you is, as it relates to how we look at time in our workday, we can very often, we are led by people that don't have an awareness of this conversation, that will never see this playback, that will never really be truly aware of the nuances of flexible work and future of work. But it doesn't mean that individually we cannot make a change in the way that we talk about work, the way that we approach work, the way that we coordinate our work and arrange our work. Even if we're not the ultimate decision maker, it doesn't mean we don't try.
Right.
Because if 10 of us try in unison, then you've made change. That's the biggest thing that came out of our Future Work Alliance event, was the fact that my goal is to empower every individual at work to know that they have autonomy over how they shape their day, spend their time, invest their energy. We need to re-empower ourselves to know that that is simply the basic truth. Even if
Mm.
you're led by someone that is boxing you in and boxing you in, we have to push back through our words, our actions, by overperforming, all these things. But it starts with personal responsibility, that it is my responsibility to avail of time autonomy and to displace time anxiety.
I want to move on because we have a few more points that we want
Go
to
for
talk
it.
about here, but this one fascinates me because you've talked often about asynchronous work.
Yes.
The workday is no longer synchronized. Now, many of us don't work solely in a co-location anymore.
Mhm.
And our peers, our colleagues, our team members, people we report to, people who report to us, are invariably in different time zones. They may even be in different continents. If you're working for a large multinational company, your team may include people from New York and London and Lisbon and Mumbai and Wellington, New Zealand.
Yep.
So, talk to me about the importance of asynchronicity
Mm.
as a feature and benefit of the modern workplace.
Yeah. So co-location, just to lay out the definition, is people working together, physically together,
Right.
in an office place. But so part of our work at Sway actually was really kind of centering people around these definitions, which I did a bad job of because I thought we all knew what asynchronous was. So I would approach
Yeah.
my work and I'd be like, hold on a second. Let's go back to the very basics. So co-located and remote are simply location-based
Right.
terms. Either like you and I, Dan, are doing this remotely right now,
Hmm.
but we could also be in this room where I am right now doing it and co-located,
Right.
physically together versus physically separated. Synchronized and asynchronized are the other part of that quadrant. That's how we describe time. So you and I are remote, but we're doing this discussion here synchronized. You and I
Hmm.
are working on this at the exact same time versus the prep work we did for this. We did this asynchronously. You sent me a
Hmm.
message over a digital platform. I thought about it on my own time and I responded back to you, back and forth. So we built up to this synchronized event. So we've used all forms of modalities. Work is definitely no longer synchronized. It is no longer the sequential, if this, then that, one after the other, being co-located. That model has completely been busted, not only by people's desire for location flexibility, but I think also by the nature of implementation of AI at work and done well, forces us to desynchronize our work or to adopt asynchronous models. So I'm just going to stop there because those terms are second nature to me and you and our
Right.
peer group, but they're not to the wider working world. And I think we've done a poor job of slowing down long enough to just to lay out the basics.
Agreed. And from the standpoint of the public discussion, how mainstream media are covering this,
Yeah.
asynchronicity gets slammed.
Yes.
Why? Because it's different. It's a different expectation that perhaps traditional workplace leaders just don't want to do. They don't want to know about it. They like the idea of going back to the way things were even pre-pandemic. Oh, by the way, asynchronicity existed long before the pandemic happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So a couple more points I wanted to talk about. And you and I, the Alliance, but
Yeah.
also many of my guests here on What's Your Work Fit, have really leaned in on agentic AI. This is the artificial intelligence that actually does stuff, that
Mm-hmm.
takes over human tasks. And in many respects, it does it brilliantly. It doesn't need a day off, doesn't need time off. It has capability of reflecting, but also deep dive thinking. And it can free human people, talent, to do other things. But it also makes us twitchy to think, okay, I've got these platforms and they are they are doing a lot of the modeling I used to do by hand or
Mm-hmm.
leading with my own technology. They're doing a lot of the thinking that I used to do. I still have to ride point over it to make sure that it's valid, that the work is in fact meaningful. But it's forcing all of us to say, how is my time best spent? You know, if we used to work in a 40-hour day, Denise, we didn't think in terms of that. But now, with a day perhaps being a day in which work is part of doing other things
Mm-hmm.
and is further impacted by the advent of agentic AI, we are now forced to think about what I'm doing and is it my time best spent? What are your thoughts?
I have two ways to answer that. The first is I want to make the point that when it comes to agentic AI and flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
they are the exact same skill set.
Mm-hmm.
It is the exact same approach to embedding a flexible way of working in an organization is the exact same approach to embedding deployment of AI successfully. Meaning to do either of these well, you have to first understand the nature of your work. And that involves unbundling our roles and looking, even spread your role across a table.
Yeah.
Look at all these unique tasks that you do and understanding which tasks have a more human element versus what has a more technical or repeatable element. That can tell us what is the work I should be doing synchronously versus asynchronously, but it also tells us what is the low-hanging fruit for automation versus where are the tasks that I should lean in on that are more human orientated. So I guess the first point is it is the exact same crossover skill set. To be good at
Mm-hmm.
flexibility and AI, they're the same exact thing. So it's a win-win for the modern workplace. But to answer specifically about AI, I have used AI extensively over the last couple of years, but I've done it in two ways. First, I used AI to optimize me.
Mm.
And then I used AI to optimize my work. And those are two very, very different things. And to explain what I mean by that, I understood by the variety and the onslaught of tools available out there, and just by having bandwidth to kind of play and iterate and be in learning groups around AI, I realized that I am a visual and an audio learner, specifically adjacent audio, not even direct audio. So by using Notebook LM as an example, I am able to take a large white paper that I would never sit down to read, run it through Notebook LM, create a dual-sided podcast, and learn easily and question the questions I have. So I can learn faster and quicker because I optimize myself in the touch points I have with the world around me.
You're dual exceptional in that point, in that I know that when you and I are talking online, you often send me a recorded audio message, because that seems to be the way that best engages with how your brain processes. That writing either takes too long or it causes you to miss something. Do I have that right?
I dread typing. If I hit a keyboard in my day, I've wasted my time. I also typing and backspacing. I also don't type anymore. I use Whisper AI as an audio diction tool. So even though your email, I might email you, but I'm talking to my email,
Right.
and it's going to coordinate and consolidate and send it to you. Also, I think quicker and easier and more creatively when I'm speaking, which is why everything I do is I approach everything from an audio perspective. It's my brain wiring, but realizing that I've optimized myself first using AI tools.
That Google AI podcast
Notebook,
platform
Notebook
is fantastic, and the two virtual people who are doing the speaking sound like they're on NPR.
Yeah,
it could be a radio broadcast. It's really astonishing how good the quality is. And I guess if you are time strapped and you happen to be commuting somewhere or on a plane, in your case, back to Ireland to visit your family, that's a perfect opportunity to read with your ears.
There you go. It's exactly right. How you read. That's a really great way to say it. Read with your ears. So not only, again, to your point, reading with your ears, I figured out how I learn best, and I figure out how I can work quickest, and that is through audio.
So let's talk about that for a second. Now, you're not married to a gifted education veteran teacher like I am, who thinks in terms of the learning styles of her students. If they're visual learners, if they're auditory learners, if they are neurodivergent because of some affect, and that affects how they draw in information. What is happening now to talent in the active workplace is, like you, they will be benefited most by figuring out what you did. I learned best when ... You happen to figure out typing is too much for me. If I can turn the learning into a Google Audio podcast, which will, in cadence, provide me the information I need and the takeaway, so that in 20 minutes, if it's in the long form, or 5 or 10 minutes if short, I will have gotten everything I need to know.
Everything I need to know, and on my level. So,
explain that for me on your level.
Expertise is now ubiquitous. So let's just say let's just say Ethan Mollick is somebody I follow for his AI ratings. And sometimes he puts out papers that are too complex for me I'd have to really think about it, because they're terms not in my industry. I'm not familiar with them. It has been able to use AI to, at ease, convert this technical jargon that I would not be able to digest into readily understood information at a higher level. Like I'm a smart person by nature, but I don't understand other fields and domains as well as obviously expert do. So AI has also made expertise ubiquitous.
Have your prompts trained the platforms you use to be more intentional and appropriate to Denise?
Yeah, of course. That's the value of it when you use AI in a certain way, is that it kind of remember it knows who you are, how I ask for things, tone of voice, stuff like that. So so that's again, I'm reducing friction points between me and acquiring knowledge. That's what AI is. It's an innovation, a tool for innovation, not for productivity. So again, I first optimized me using AI to get closer to the innovation.
Okay, so I'm old as dirt. And when I started my career, I had a daytimer's date book that was only as good as the entries that I put into it.
Mm-hmm.
What I like most about agentic AI tools now is that they are at their best. They make me my best when they learn how I get through a day
Mm-hmm.
and where I stumble and where I forget stuff. You know, the biggest nightmare for a podcaster is you miss your on-air date, or you miss something. You miss a pre-screen interview. And it happens sometimes if I have to rely on my own data input to a calendar. But where I see the technology going is that it becomes a digital extension of me. It's
Yeah.
remembering things that I have to remember. Oh yeah, Marcia's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
I won't forget that. But you know what I may forget? I may forget her birthday dinner at the French restaurant that we both
Mm-hmm.
like. If we all can use AI to do that better, we're going to be less disappointed with our day.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get more done. AI tools are going to remind us through the day, you know, Dan, you've been sitting on your ass too long. Get up and walk around. Get your heart pumping. Go and you know, meet up with that friend you wanted to and go take a walk or something. This is where our friend Ram Srinivasan is telling me things are headed.
Yeah.
But this is where I think we are most going to benefit from these technologies and help answer the question, have I spent my time well, or as well as I could?
And that is the name of the game.
Right.
You know, when we say we want to get more time out of the day, you can't.
No.
There's a 24-hour clock. Again, we talked about that. It's an equalizer. And I don't necessarily know if it's about, are you jamming more things in your day? Because we have this in today's world, a natural desire to have a clean to-do list, to reach inbox zero, that feeling like, I think the question is more, can we spend our time in a way that we're producing higher quality outputs? Whether that's spending time writing a book you've always wanted to do, or being more effective and impactful at work, or being more present in your home life, whatever floats your boat, whatever your configuration is in this season of your life, can I optimize the 24 hours I'm given in a day using AI? But then do I know what to do when I have that space back in my day? So I'm going to underpin this down. Like, this is not new news, meaning the World Economic Forum publishes its future outlook on top skills needed for the future of work, and it has done for increments over the good number of years.
Mm-hmm.
The top 5 over the last several years have all been human skills, that of creativity, problem solving, innovation, instinct, all of these stuff that comes natural to us as humans. This is the era we're moving into, this enlightenment era.
Yes.
Where we're no longer going to be running after kind of fighting against the clock to find more time in our day. I think we're going to be able to sit back a little bit more and that's why I'm prompting these introspective prompts on our discussion here, because that's where we're at. Can we be introspective to align ourselves to the work we hope and want to do, to optimize, reduce kind of time spillage, and optimize for the energy, and using the human tasks that we are going to be asked to and measured by when agentic AI becomes more of a force across our workflows?
You used a word just now, enlightenment.
Yeah.
That makes many people who are familiar with world history think about the American Revolution. That coincided with the European time of enlightenment, where ideas reigned supreme. It wasn't just to believe what the king said you were supposed to believe. We turned to science, we turned to literature, We turned
Yeah.
to music. We had all these forms of expression that people never valued the way they did until the Age of Enlightenment happened, when we had all the science and technological breakthrough. But most importantly, enlightenment of thought. And that is where I want to get into the last thing, because this really excites me more than anything. Time is shifting. This is such a Denise Brouder frame. Oh my God. Time is shifting from a container of work to a currency of meaning. So, my dear, what do you think of this?
I like how you're sitting back on this one.
Yeah.
There's probably many ways to answer this question, and it is very apt of today's world. But I will preface this by saying one of the most interesting things about the world to me is how we can open our eyes and look at something, and many of us can open our eyes and look at the same thing and see something so different. It is the spice of life. It is the frustration of life. Like, how can we all be looking at the same thing, but seeing things so very different? That is the nature of the world around us. And I'm saying that to begin with because the currency meaning, that is, of course, what's happening right now. That is the acquisition target for most of us. And it is an age of enlightenment. And I think that the COVID era accelerated this sense of this dual-sided question, which is, who am I and why am I here? And did it seem, I think for a very long time, that dual-sided question has been a very real feature of why we ever work. I'm not just saying today, as in 2025, it was the same question for decades and decades and decades have been, why am I here? Who am I and why am I here? And how do I discover this identity through the language of my work? I think that in today's world, we're getting closer to being very honest that is the question that we're all trying to ask. So time is no longer a container of work, a measurement of variables, an easy way to calculate paychecks. It's most certainly is shifting to the currency of meaning, which again, I think it's an incorrect view to sign up for any job in any company, in any capacity, and expect a company to give you a sense of meaning or purpose. That's a very personal mission that every person is on in some degree, or will probably feel that itch at some point in their life. It's not for a company to do that. It's your personal mission. It's your personal introspective look on who am I, why am I here? Why does my work matter? What meaning am I deriving from it? And perhaps you're not getting meaning from your work. Maybe it's other parts of your life. And maybe your job that you don't get meaning from is fulfilling or allowing you to live a life where you can find purpose and meaning in other parts. I don't think it's a strict formula.
And I think this is why now, quite suddenly, people who have graduated college for bachelor's degrees with philosophy degrees are suddenly becoming hot, and perhaps hotter than people like me who got advanced communications degrees, or people who got business administration degrees.
Yes.
It's that currency of meaning. Can you think? Can you express? Can you effectively move the levers around you to make the world a better place? And
yeah,
no company can do that for you. You know, it's that would be malpractice. But what they can do is create conditions that allow people who work to live their best lives.
I said that exact thing in a meeting a couple of summers ago here in New York, where I live, and I was actually at a round table at City Hall with I'm not sure if I told you this before, Dan, like with Mayor Adams and his administration.
Yeah.
Actually, by the way, it was a round table. It was a huge mahogany round table.
Oh wow!
Literally a massive round table, and his teams were kind of encircling the table, and it was an open conversation with various people from the city focused on future of work. And I brought that very thing up, and I looked him directly in the eye, and I said, you cannot give, and nor should you give people purpose and meaning in their work lives. I said, but you can create the conditions for which they can discover that. And is that not a workplace worth putting together?
Well, Eric's looking for work, so hopefully he'll keep your sage insight in mind as he ponders his next work fit, his
Yeah.
next chapter of work.
Yeah.
I just have a couple more questions to ask you, and
Fire away.
I want to, what's been fun, Denise. You and I've known each other now, I think, of around 7 years,
Yeah.
and we've both grown in our appreciation for, but knowledge of as well, of modern work, of how this thing that used to be a separate and distinct part of one's life is now enmeshed into other beautiful parts of the day. As we quickly approach the new year into 2026, what are the things that you're hoping will bubble up, will happen, that will get people closer to this wonderful feeling that, you know what, I go to work, it's really cool, it doesn't own my day,
Mm.
I have this amazing life with my friends and my loved ones and my
Mm-hmm.
children, and I find time to do other things that may be a side hustle or maybe even charitable work, whatever that happens to be. But my day is good. I'm not rich. I don't care about that.
Mm.
I'm paying the bills. Everything is good. I love my life.
Mm.
What do you think is going to happen in the new year that gets more of us closer to that nirvana?
I think you just kind of you included it right at the end there, which is I'm not rich, but I have all these other things. And what I mean by that is that's why the Alliance is, we talked about it being a volunteer organization and money doesn't trade. For me, I work on the Alliance because it is a joy, truly a joy to bring people together, to examine the assumptions that we make about the way we work, about ourselves, to reconstruct a modern version of work that is just, resilient, and far more humanized.
Right.
So the situation you just described there in setting up that question, you described very much an idealistic state, right? I can turn off from work. I enjoy work. I love my family, my friends. I got time for side hustle. That's an ideal state that we would all love to have. And it's hard to get there. But I think one is, you mentioned I may not be rich, but all these things. I guess it's about, to me, about examining what we call our priorities and really challenging to understand we are a function of our habits. Most of them are subconscious. We're driven by them. We don't often stop long enough to examine what we do, why we do. So my hope for 2026 is that we will give ourselves enough space just to step back from the lives we created long enough to kind of examine why we do what we do. Keep the good, ditch the bad, rewire, reach out. And I would say more than anything else, I think we're losing a lot of our desire and willingness to connect to other people. I think that that's a major, it's made society very dry and brittle in our day-to-day interactions with people. And I think that's kind of a major missing component. But that could also be because we're becoming more introverted, but hopefully we kind of figure that out and come back out again into our communities and reconnect in our work lives, in our personal lives, in our neighborhoods.
And
so,
yet, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
What I was going to say, and yet, school systems across the United States, I know in New Jersey, most definitely in Virginia, have taken the phones away during the class day.
Yeah.
And guess what has happened? Not only are the test scores improving and the outcomes getting better, the kids are happier.
Yeah.
Because they now, without that distraction in the palm of their hand, they now have to relate to one another. And you know what? They realize that kids have been missing out on the intimacy of friendships and how important those are to leading a wonderful day.
Why would you be saying that's only children? I think adults are equally in that same bucket.
Yes, but I don't know how we turn off the tap for adults. You can, in a school system, you can do that. In a school, you can do that. And I merely point that out to say, look at the good that came out of that. Now, when you send your children to summer camp, the same thing happens. They can't take their personal tech with them. So they're not, nose into the screen. we have to find a way to look up more
Yeah.
in 2026. And if we do that, and it may mean creating barriers for people to use their tech in certain situations. You know, you go to the mixer, you know, like they used to put the keys in the jar, you know, so that you wouldn't leave. Maybe you have to put the phones in the jar or in the bowl, if you will, or somebody keeps a handle on the phone so that you're not distracted from meeting new people, right?
Totally.
And that's a little bit of mama's medicine, but I think we have to try to do it because we have been so seduced by technology that it's robbed us of our humanity and our happiness. If we can do that, a lot of these other things that we've talked about this hour will come easier, I believe.
Yeah. Again, it's what is your intention? I go back to, if we were to adopt AI effectively to optimize ourselves first, then optimize our workflow, we could release pressure on time to engage energetically with the world around us and our work and what we do. Then we could role model these behaviors to younger generations. But again, I go back to our kind of key phrase at the Alliance that to work differently, we can only do that by starting to think differently. We have to think differently about how we see ourselves fitting into the world of work around us and examining our assumptions. We go back to just step back and look at how you think.
I love that. I love how you end on that note. Before we get to our final question, I want to ask you to point our viewers and listeners to where they can find you on social media and also on the Future of Work Alliance.
Yeah, so I'm readily available on LinkedIn. Is a great platform. So Denise Brouder on LinkedIn. Also, the Future Work Alliance is on LinkedIn. We post a lot of our work there too from all the membership. And then our website, actually the website's probably a good one to go to.
Yeah.
It's futureofworkalliance.com. If you visit that website, our primary page, you'll get a very solid understanding for why we exist, but also why are we becoming exponentially successful with the model we've chosen, which is an unusual one. I think it's worth looking at.
I agree with you. And I'm proud of the work we've done on it. It's really a labor of love. I'm going to ask you one final question, but before I do, stick in the green room, stay around in the green room, if you will, just so we can wrap up afterwards after we finish recording. So let's get to the final question for you, Denise. And it is, what's your work fit? Now, I know I've asked you this question before and I've shown you past answers. I want to start fresh and ask you what attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes the work that you do a wonderful part of your day, doing many wonderful and meaningful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day. What's your work fit?
I think my work fit now, and if you look back at my answer over the years, it shifts and changes. I think that my work fit now is really being aware of building relationships with people from all different walks of industry and life. I find that is utterly fascinating, and that network is immensely valuable to my own creativity and business endeavors and everything else. I would say that's where I am right now.
I love it. Denise, my dear friend, my greatest joy in this work has been getting to know you and working alongside you professionally, but also becoming really good friends with you. We've helped each other out professionally, but also personally on a lot of the challenges that we're each facing. And I'm grateful to you and for your friendship. Thank you so much.
Same to you, my friend. Same to you.
Okay, we'll see you next week.
See you next